Everybody, Manny here once again. Welcome to DFS Zone, your source for daily fantasy sport lineup advice for the NFL and NBA. Got a brand new video for you guys. We got week 12 of the NFL, but before I get started, ladies and gentlemen, like always, I appreciate you guys. Drop a like on the video. If you're new to the channel, it's your first time here, never ever seen any of my NFL or NBA lineup advice videos, and you have not as of yet become a part of the DFS Zone community, the only thing you have to do is subscribe down below. Make sure you put on those post notifications, that bell icon. Make sure you click on that, turn that on. This way you don't miss out on any of my NFL or NBA lineup advice videos. All right. Week 12 of the NFL, man. We're going to get right to it. I'm going to give you one player per position. As you know, I have been doing NBA, and I got to do videos for that pretty much every day. So it's been very difficult to do the NFL the way I was doing it at the very beginning of the year. So for the last couple of weeks, you guys have been getting at least one play per position. We're going to stick to that, and hopefully it pans out for you. There's a lot of people in play in a large slate, but then again, I'm trying to pinpoint and try to give you guys the best possible opportunity on the best possible plays that I think, in my opinion, should be able to do fairly well against the opposition that they're going up against that week. So we're going to go right into it. We're going to go first. We're going to go through the quarterback first. At quarterback this week, man, I really do like the whole factors of him being at home, and they have been playing well as a unit at home, and that's Andrew Luck and the Indianapolis Colts. I like Andrew Luck here, man. 8,400 on Fanduel. He's 6,400 on DK. I love the whole factors of look how well he's been playing. I mean, 276, pretty much 277 yards per game, 29 touchdowns, 22.6 fantasy points per game. And I love the factors that he's doing very well, especially at home. But look at this. Look at these numbers, man. His numbers, his efficiency as far as completion percentage has been fantastic. A lot of short passes, but nonetheless, he's very efficient. 23 of 29, 21 of 29, 22 of 31. This is over the last 3 weeks. And look at this. 7 games in a row, at least at 3 touchdowns or better. You cannot go wrong. And he's had, in the last 3 games, 9 touchdowns and only 1 interception. He's been really good as far as not turning over the ball. It happened early on in the year, but now over the last 4 or 5 games, he's been pretty solid, and he's averaging pretty much in that 23-25 fantasy point level. And as you can see, he has 135 fantasy point game thus far this year, so he's very much capable of getting it done. I love the factors that he has at home. At home, he has 71% completion percentage and has thrown 16 touchdowns out of those 29 that he has had. Also, he is the 11th leading passer in the NFL, coming in with a 67% completion percentage, 277 yards per game. Now, going back to home, I said he was 71% completion. That's one of the reasons why I chose him this week. He's also thrown for 304 yards per game in those games at home, and has thrown and has accumulated 26 fantasy points per game at home. So he is definitely a lot better at home than he is on the road. Overall, in the last 7 games, he has had 3 TDs during the course of those games per game. All right. He's coming in the red zone. He's done fairly well, 4th in the red zone as far as passing is concerned. 43 passes, 43 completions out of 70 passes, 60% completion percentage. He has thrown 23 touchdowns, and he's throwing for 324 yards in the red zone. Only 1 interception. That is phenomenal considering he's thrown 23 touchdowns in the red zone. Inside the 10, he's 21 of 31, 65% completion percentage, 96 yards and 14 touchdowns. So out of the 23 in the red zone, he has had 14 inside the 10. He's going up against Miami. Miami's 16th in pass defense this year. They're not too bad. 250 yards per game, 8.1 yards per catch against them, and 18 touchdowns they have surrendered to the opposition. They are 15th in receiving yards given up to receivers. Okay, so they're pretty much in the middle of the pack in both statistics. 262 yards per game, 12 yards per completion for the receivers, and 18 TDs. In the last 4 games for Miami, in the last 4 out of the 5 games, they have allowed 31, 42, 32, and 28 points per game. So they've been really having a rough time stopping opposing offenses as of late in 4 out of the last 5 games. They come in here, they're giving up the 11th fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks per game this year, which is pretty impressive, only giving up 18.2 DK and 17.3 Fanduel. But again, Andrew Luck, and then not only that, just the defense and how many points they've given up to the opposing offenses. I could see Andrew Luck having a great game here, especially at home in a dome. Don't have to worry about weather, where some of the other matchups, you got some pretty bad weather in some areas. This is definitely the nicest game that could possibly go just right for a quarterback, and that's Andrew Luck at home inside his dome. So I definitely like him here. Miami coming in also in the red zone. 57% of the time, opponents have scored a touchdown on them. They have been pretty stagnant there. They've been really good as far as holding people down. 3.5 opportunities per game, and the opponents are only scoring 2 TDs. And as far as red zone offense for Indianapolis, they are 68.2% of the time they do score a touchdown in the red zone. They're averaging 4 opportunities per game, which is quite a bit of an amount of opportunities, and only scoring 2 TDs and a field goal. If they can convert a little bit more, they'll be just fine. But I think this is a good matchup for Andrew Luck at home. So Andrew Luck is my quarterback this week. At running back this week, I also I'm going to have a little bit of exposure to Leonard Fournette as well. I like this matchup here against Buffalo, but Buffalo is at home, and the weather is not going to always be great over there. It's going to be pretty cold, and we're talking about a player in Leonard Fournette that has played in warm weather even throughout college. Is going to be in a tough atmosphere here in Buffalo with the cold temperatures. So I am going to have some exposure to him. I think he could definitely do well here in this matchup. James Conner in this matchup against Denver should be pretty nice as well. He's had a couple off weeks, but I think he's going to bounce back this week. But I'm going to come down. The game that's most interesting to me is the Cleveland-Cincinnati game, because I think this game is going to be in the 20s, pretty high scoring. And I can see both teams with their running backs as well as receivers and quarterbacks doing fairly well here. But I'm going to go with Nick Chubb. And the only reason I'm going to go with Nick Chubb over Joe Mixon, which I was considering Joe Mixon, is just simply because he is now an integral part of this offense. He is getting opportunities. He's the leading rusher now. Ever since he has they traded Mr. Hyde, he has gone 18, 18, 22, and 20, and he is taking advantage of that. So he's getting his touches throughout the game. He had 23 touches last week with 3 receptions, 3 targets, and 3 receiving. He received all 3 he caught all 3 catches for 33 yards and a touchdown. Big 34 fantasy point game for Nick Chubb last week. But the most important thing is that he, as of late, has been pretty much the lead back on this team, and they are giving him an opportunity to get the ball. And that's most important when you have a back. You got to try to make sure that your running game gets off to the right track, and you got to say to yourself, hey, we got to hand off the ball to a kid that is more than capable of lighting it up any single time. As you can see here against Oakland, he only had 3 touches of the ball, and he had 105 yards. So he could be very explosive, and he's going up against a team that has been struggling against running backs. Granted, look at it in the last 4 games, he has faced 4 teams, especially in the last 3 weeks. He's faced Atlanta, Kansas City, and Pittsburgh. All those 3 teams are very vulnerable against the run thus far this year, especially Kansas City and Atlanta, and he definitely torched them for 22 for 85 and 2,476. And now they're going to face Cincinnati, who is right now, at the moment, the worst team defending against running backs thus far this year, and they are like second or third of the most giving up the most fantasy points to running backs this year as well. So I definitely like Mr. Chubb here. He's just the numbers also. 3 TDs in the last 2 games, 2 rushing, 1 receiving. He's also has 6 receptions over that course of that time, 48 yards, 8 receptions per 8 yards per catch, and 1 touchdown. In the red zone, not a whole lot of opportunities, but because he's just right now is only in his 5th week as the lead rusher, the lead back for the team, 12 rushes, 30 yards, 2 TDs. Inside the 10, he has had 8 opportunities with 12 rushes for 12 yards, and 2 TDs. Going up against Cincinnati, like I said, they are dead last in rushing defense, giving up 153.8 yards per game and 13 touchdowns, 5 yards per rush, and they got a kid who's coming in here who's averaging 6.2 yards per rush. As you can see, 58 yards rushing, 6 TDs, and about 10 fantasy points per game. Again, about Nick Chubb, as you can see, in the last 2 weeks, he has been crushing over 10 fantasy points per game. He's at 15 and 34 over the last 2 weeks. They're facing, and again, most importantly, we're talking about a team that's dead last in rushing yards, giving up to the opposing running backs and opposing offenses. Cleveland is coming in here. They're the 6th best offensive rushing team in the NFL right now. They are averaging 133.2 yards per game, 4.8 yards per rush, and 11 TDs over that span thus far this year. So they're facing a very good rushing attack here in Cleveland, the Cincinnati Bengals. So I definitely see Mr. Chubb and the Cleveland team really moving down the field, definitely moving those chains and putting them in a position to score. Cincinnati against running backs this year, 235 rushing yards, 120 yards per game, 10 TDs coughed up. They also have given up 58 receptions to dual threat backs, to 523 yards and 5 touchdowns in that aspect as well. And third most fantasy points per game allowed to running backs, giving up 33.4 DK and 29.3 Fanduel. And we have a kid here that has the potential to give you 20. Has he done it before? Before here, 15 or 34. I mean, I just love the matchup. I love the opportunity that this young man has. And not only that, we know he's going to get touches. We know he's going to be handed the ball. So Nick Chubb is my running back this week. In the red zone, going as far as Cincinnati, in the red zone, they have given up 66.6% of the time. Opponents have been able to score a touchdown on them. 4 opportunities per game, 2 touchdowns and a field goal. And Cleveland's offense in the red zone, 62% of the time they are in the red zone. They score TD, 3 opportunities per game, and they're coming through with 1 touchdown and 1 field goal. So they have an opportunity to get 2, possibly 3 opportunities in the red zone against this team. I can even see it even as maybe even 3.5, 4 opportunities where Mr. Chubb may have an opportunity to rush one in the end zone. So Nick Chubb is my running back. At wide receiver, you could very easily have correlation. I definitely will have some exposure to T.Y. Hilton simply because I am going to have some exposure to Mr. Andrew Luck. But here, considering I got to give you one possible good play, definitely, I mean, Odell Beckham Jr., with all the injuries that Philadelphia has, hands down, should be someone that if you could pay up for him, you should definitely select him. I will have some exposure to OBJ. There's no doubt about it. I'm not going to name him here as a receiver because I think that's someone that you definitely, if you are a fan of the sport, you would know Philadelphia has some issues and they've been vulnerable there. They have actually been vulnerable against receivers as far as fantasy points as well. So, and that's all due to the fact that they have all those injuries. So Odell Beckham Jr. is definitely a solid play here, definitely more so than AB, Antonio Brown. If you're going to compare these two here in their matchups, I would definitely go OBJ. But we're going to come down. Obviously, like I said, I'm going to have some exposure to T.Y. Hilton. But for the sake of the video, just to be able to give you other options, because that's the whole idea here, is obviously give you a couple other plays. I'm going to go back to that Cleveland-Cincinnati game because I think that game is going to be the most intriguing game, especially if the weather holds up well. But Tyler Boyd, I've given you guys this guy twice this year in my lineups, and this is the 3rd time I'm going to him this year, and he has not let me down. He has played well both times I mentioned him, and this is the 3rd time I'm going to mention him. Last week, 11 targets. Look at this. He's a playmaker. He had 11 targets last week. He had 4 receptions for 71 yards. So that's more than 15, 16 yards per catch. More like 17 yards per catch. That is not bad at all if you can be able to get that kind of production from a guy. But what I like most of is he's coming in here. Let's go over his numbers first. 75.6 yards per game, 5 receiving touchdowns, 13.4 fantasy points per game. We know he's been in a little bit of a stretch here where he has not put over 10 fantasy points, but we know he's capable of getting you 20. He's done it 3 times already this year, and he's been in the teens 15 and 18 twice. So we know he can get 15, 16 or better any given week. But I like the numbers that he has. He's coming in 6,800 on DK. He's 6K, so just keep that in mind. He's definitely even a little bit more better priced on DK, but 6,800 here on Fanduel is a good price for Tyler Boyd in a matchup where he should have some opportunity to get a lot of targets. But at home, I like his home and away splits. At home, he has had 29 receptions thus far this year for 400 yards, 80 yards per game, 13.8 yards per catch, which I found that to be impressive. And on top of that, he's had 4 touchdowns. He's averaging 19.2 fantasy points per game at home. So he has been excellent as far as at home, and he's also targeted well in the red zone in that area as well. In the red zone, he has had 8 targets, 8 receptions, 100% catch percentage there, 66 yards, and 4 TDs inside the 20. Inside the 10, he's had 2 targets, 2 receptions, 100% there as well, 11 yards, 2 TDs. So 2 TDs out of his 4 have been inside the 10. He's going up against Cleveland. Cleveland is 28th in pass defense this year, giving up 288 yards per game, 7.3 yards per reception, 16 touchdowns. But they also are 27th in receiving yards given up to the opposing receivers. 27th in the league, allowing 302 yards per game to receivers. Of course, the 16 TDs, 11.7 yards per reception. And we have a young man here that is averaging 13.8 yards per catch. So we know he's not getting those little dump offs. You know, he is getting some passes, he's getting some yardage, and he is also very explosive. He is a game. He's definitely a game. A guy that's a good playmaker. Then we come down to Cleveland versus receivers. They are 8th most fantasy points per game given up to receivers thus far this year, allowing about 185 yards per game to receivers and 10 TDs. Total fantasy points, 41.7 DK fantasy points per game given up to opposing wide receivers, and 32.6 Fanduel. So, I mean, this young man should be able to at least get 16 or 17 fantasy points this week or better. In the red zone, Cleveland, 66.6% of the time, the opponents they have allowed the opponents to score a touchdown, 3.5 opportunities per game for the opposition, and the opposition is putting in 2 touchdowns and a field goal. We come in, on the other hand, Cincinnati, number 1 in the NFL, in red zone, turning in red zone opportunities into touchdowns. 79.3% of the time, they're number 1. They are coming in here, 79.3%, 3 opportunities per game and scoring 2 touchdowns and a field goal. Every opportunity they get up there, they are basically at least getting a touchdown or a field goal. So they're very, very efficient in the red zone. Tyler Boyd, definitely in a good spot this week for the Cincinnati Bengals in this game against the Cleveland. All right, next we're gonna go over the tight end. Now, that tight end I am going with. Now, granted, there's a couple guys that play. Obviously, Zach Ertz is someone you could always consider. Greg Kittle's in a very, very good spot against Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay is very vulnerable to the tight end position. 7,500. I will probably get him in 1 or 2 lineups tomorrow, so I definitely will favor him out of the top tier guys here. Obviously, I think he's in the best spot over Zach Ertz versus the Giants. But I think he is someone you can consider as well. Greg Olsen is always dangerous at home in Carolina. You can go that route. Well, O.J. Howard out. Obviously, Cameron Brate is definitely in play. Definitely someone that I'm going to have some exposure to, because even though his numbers they don't have a lot of numbers for Mr. Brate as of late, because O.J. has been the main tight end for Tampa. But Tampa's offense does revolve around the tight end. So I can see where his 5 or 6 or 7 targets per game is going to put Brate in a position. He may get the 6 or 7 targets tomorrow, especially against San Francisco. So again, I think Cameron Brate is someone that you can consider. I am going to come down and I'm going to select my boy David Njoku. The only reason I'm going with Njoku is because I've had him twice before. One time he came off really, really good for me. And again, I mean, I think he's just in a very favorable matchup here against Cincinnati, who's had vulnerability thus far this year to tight ends. Last week, not a good game for him. Only 1 target, 1 reception. Did get 18 yards in that one. He is capable, as you can see, 41 yards per game, 2 receiving touchdowns, 7.4 fantasy points per game. He has 13, 15-point upside. And granted, he can have a dud game where he can only have 2.3 fantasy points per game. I don't think that's going to be the issue this week. 5,100 for Mr. Njoku, 3,800 on DK. Definitely love his price on DK. We'll have more exposure to him there at that price. I know he's a game time decision, but he practiced fully yesterday. I think he's going to be a go. So I'm definitely going to lock him in here on FanDuel and as well on Draftkings. Again, if he can get his 5 to 6 targets a game like he was averaging here over the last 2 games prior to last week's game, I think he would be just fine, and he's more than capable of getting in the red zone and getting a touchdown as well. So I think this is a favorable matchup where he's going to have those opportunities. Again, in the he's going up against Cincinnati. Cincinnati is the biggest issue here. They have been horrible against the passing offense. Is 29th in passing defense this year, giving up 296 yards per game, 7.9 yards per catch, 21 TDs. They're 28th in yards allowed to receivers this year, 306 yards per game, 11.8 yards per reception. And we have a gentleman here that's averaging probably about 9.4 yards per reception. Cincinnati versus tight ends, they're 4th most fantasy points per game allowed to tight ends. That's one of the main reasons why I chose them. They have given up 61 receptions, 683 yards allowed thus far this year, 5 TDs, and 16.1 DK and 13 Fanduel points. And we have a kid here that has 13 to 15 Fanduel and DK upside. So there's a possibility, definitely a great chance for David Njoku to do very well here. In the red zone, Cincinnati has coughed up 66.6% of the time. They have given up at least a touchdown to the opposition. 4 opportunities per game for the opposition and basically 2 touchdowns and a field goal. Cleveland is coming in here. They're only averaging 62% conversion ratio in the red zone as far as an offense is concerned. They're only getting 3 opportunities per game and only converting at a 1 touchdown and 1 field goal clip. They definitely have to do better than that in this matchup here. I think this game is going to be a pretty competitive game. I think it's going to be in the high 20s. And again, I'm definitely feel that David Njoku, if he gets opportunities and gets some targets, he could definitely get in the end zone. So I'm going to go with Mr. Njoku. Again, Cameron Brate is definitely a nice play tomorrow as well if you wanted to go a little bit cheaper. As far as defense is concerned, man, this is always like a crapshoot, man, for me. I mean, last week I gave you guys Tennessee Titans. They went out there and they blew it all in my face. This week I'm going to go with the Indianapolis Colts. And the only reason I'm going with the Colts is, for one, they're playing at home. For two, they've played fairly well at home. I mean, they're 17th in total defense this year, which is not the greatest. They're right there in the middle of the pack. But what I like is that at home, they are averaging 9.8 fantasy points per game, nearly 10 fantasy points per game from a 7 average, as opposed to on the road, only 4.4 fantasy points per game. So they have done a lot better at home. Another thing that I like is they have given up the least amount of sacks to their offense as far as their quarterback. They have given up the least amount of sacks. And when it comes defensively, they're second. The sacks by the defense this year, they are 26. They also have at home 16. They have had 26 sacks this year. 16 of them have come at home. The other thing I also like is they also have had 11 interceptions thus far this year, and 7 out of the 11 have been at home as well. So they have played better at home as a team, as a defense, as far as getting to the quarterback and creating turnovers. So I'm just banking on that. Basically, I mean, pretty much at defense is pretty much a crapshoot for folks. I'd be totally honest with you. It seems like every week you can go with probably the best possible defense, and sometimes it just does not pan out. Last week, Tennessee didn't play well at all after they have played so well for a week or two. And this week I'm going to go with the Colts. Granted, they're giving up quite a bit of points, but again, they're not giving up that kind of points at home as they are on the road. If you look here, 10 here, 26, 3 at home, 31 here is big, and 28 here. So pretty much balanced, I think, all the way across the board. But they're defensively, as far as interceptions, as far as sacks are concerned, and as far as creating turnovers they have done a lot better at home. So I am going to bank it on the Colts. They're 4,400 here on Fanduel, only 2,900 on DK, so I think they're definitely a nice play on DK. But that's pretty much it. That is pretty much it for my football picks this week. So we got ourselves Andrew Luck. We got ourselves Mr. Nick Chubb for your running back. At wide receiver, we went with Mr. Tyler Boyd. At tight end, we went with David Njoku. And on defense, the Indianapolis Colts. Obviously, there's a lot of other people that are in play, but I am not going to be able to go over every single one that I kind of like. So, but that's pretty much it. Those are my top 5 for you guys this week, man. Wish you guys a lot of luck. Again, drop a like on the video. If you're new to the channel, you have not subscribed yet, and you want to continue to get your NFL lineup advice, definitely make sure you subscribe down below. Make sure you put on your post notification, that bell icon, turn it on. This way you don't miss out on any of those NFL or even NBA. I do NBA videos pretty much every day, at least 6 days a week. I usually take Sundays off, but pretty much every day of the week. So definitely subscribe and like and so on and so forth. All right. I wish you guys a lot of luck, and I'll see you guys for week 13.